The Serena Cafe was one of those places that seemed untouched by the passage of time. While the rest of the city gave in to modern trends, with minimalist coffee shops and menus filled with incomprehensible names, Serena held on to its vintage decor, solid wood tables, and the unmistakable aroma of freshly ground beans. It was there that Mariana and Alexandre met 8 years ago, when she spilled coffee on his economics book. It was there they had their first serious fight, 2 years later. And it was there, too, that they ended their relationship on a gray autumn afternoon. It felt fitting, Mariana thought, that this would be the place where they met again after 5 years. The rain fell stubbornly as she stepped inside, shaking off the umbrella before closing it. The doorbell chimed to announce her arrival, but no one seemed to notice. The cafe was full, as it always was on rainy afternoons. Her eyes scanned the room, trying to adjust to the warm yellow lighting until they landed on what she was looking for. A solitary figure sitting at a corner table, near the window that faced the street. For a moment, she almost didn't recognize him. There was something different in his posture, in the way he occupied the space. The Alexandra she once knew always seemed to shrink himself, as if apologizing for existing. This man, sitting alone, absent-mindedly stirring a cup of coffee while watching the rain outside, looked completely at ease in his own skin. Taking a deep breath and tightening the strap of her bag, she walked toward him. 5 years. 5 long years since she had ended the relationship and left to build her career in another country. 5 years of occasional birthday messages, of likes on social media posts that grew more and more infrequent until they stopped altogether. 5 years in which she had built an entire life without him, and still something had made her give in to the impulse to send that message. A simple, "I'm back in town. Would you like to grab a coffee?" His reply came almost instantly. Sure, it'd be nice to see you." That gave away nothing. "Hi, Alex," she said, stopping by the table, her voice shakier than she would have liked. When he lifted his gaze, Mariana felt her heart skip a beat. The face was familiar. The strong features, the slightly crooked nose from a childhood fall, the thick eyebrows that nearly touched when he was focused. But there was something so different, she could hardly name it. The brown eyes that once shone with a near-desperate admiration for her now observed her with a calm she had never seen before. His gaze was direct, present, but without the overwhelming intensity of the past. "Mariana," he replied with a gentle smile, standing to greet her. He seemed a few centimeters taller than she remembered, or maybe it was just the straighter posture. "Please, have a seat. Would you like something to drink? Still go for that chai latte with almond milk?" She blinked, surprised he remembered her favorite drink. "Yes, I still do." "I'll order it for you," he said, motioning to the waiter. While he placed the order, Mariana took the opportunity to observe him more closely. His hair was shorter now, cut in a way that framed his face better. A few strands of gray at his temples gave him a distinguished air that somehow suited him perfectly. He wore a simple blue shirt, well-fitted, hinting at a more defined physique than she recalled. But it wasn't just the physical changes. There was something in the way he moved, the way he spoke, a quiet confidence that hadn't been there before. The Alexandra she once knew was always trying to please, always worried about saying the right thing, making the right gesture, as if at any moment she might decide he wasn't enough. This Alexandra seemed at peace. "You're different," she said when he finished ordering, trying to break the ice. 5 years is long enough to change a lot, he replied with a slight smile. His voice was deeper, more measured. "No, it's not just that. It's something more," she insisted, leaning forward slightly. "You seem, I don't know how to explain it. More present," he offered, raising an eyebrow. "Less anxious, less desperate?" The frankness of his answer caught her off guard. The Alexandra she once knew would have dodged the topic, tried to downplay his insecurities, pretend they didn't exist. "Maybe all of the above," she replied honestly. He laughed, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Let's just say I learned a few things about myself in the meantime." The conversation flowed with an unexpected ease as her chai latte and his coffee arrived at the table. Mariana spoke about her work abroad as an architect, the projects she had worked on, the places she had visited, the challenges of living in a different country. She told him about her small but well-located apartment, the friendships she had formed, how she had adapted to a new culture. He listened attentively, asking questions, showing genuine interest. There was no resentment in his voice when he asked about. Alexandra nodded, as if he completely understood what she meant. "The streets are the same, the places are the same, but everything feels different because you are different." "Exactly," she said, surprised by the accuracy of his observation. The Alexandra she had known would have tried to offer solutions, advice, ways to make her feel better. This new Alexandra simply understood and accepted. When it was his turn to speak, Alexandra shared that he had become a university literature professor, a drastic change from the economics he studied when they first met. He mentioned a recent hobby he'd picked up, rock climbing, which he'd started 3 years ago and which had taken him on trips to national parks. He spoke about books he'd read lately, recommending a few he thought she might like based on the tastes he still remembered her having. There was something disarming about the way he spoke about his life. It was a complete story, fulfilling in itself. There were no empty spaces suggesting he was waiting for something or someone to complete him. "You seem well," she finally said, studying him. Truly well, she thought, but didn't say aloud. "I am," he confirmed with a calm smile. "Very well, actually." That's when she noticed. It wasn't just the straighter posture or the more confident gaze. It was something deeper, something fundamental. Alexandra spoke without apologizing, smiled without seeking approval, listened without anxiety. There was no trace of the insecurity that had once defined so many of their interactions. "What happened to you?" Mariana asked, unable to hold back the question. "I mean, you were always, you know, insecure, anxious, emotionally dependent." He finished for her, without a trace of bitterness or resentment. "You can say it, Marie. I'm not going to fall apart." The use of her old nickname caught her off guard. There was a quiet intimacy in that Marie she hadn't expected, but it somehow felt natural, as if, despite all the changes, there was still an invisible thread connecting them to the past they had once shared. Alexander took a sip of his coffee before answering her original question. "After you left, I was lost for a while. I thought I'd never get over it. I tried to move on too quickly, got involved with people I shouldn't have, made mistakes, but then during a particularly low point, I realized I was trying to fill a void with external validation that only I could truly fill from within." He told her how, about a year after their breakup, he'd started therapy. How he had begun to identify patterns of codependency that stemmed from a childhood marked by emotionally distant parents. He spoke about the hard work of rebuilding his identity without anchoring it to another person. "I realized I had placed the entire responsibility for my happiness on you, and that wasn't fair, not to me and not to you," he explained, slowly rotating his coffee cup between his hands. "I made you into a project, a solution for my inner problems. And when you decided to leave, everything collapsed. Because I hadn't built anything solid inside myself." His words echoed deeply within her. How many times during their relationship had she felt suffocated by the weight of that responsibility? How often had she tried, with as much gentleness as she could muster, to explain that she couldn't be the only source of his happiness, that it was too heavy a burden for one person to carry? "It wasn't easy," he continued. "I had to face a lot of uncomfortable truths about myself, about how I used relationships as crutches, how I avoided the inner work of truly knowing and accepting who I was." As she listened, Mariana felt a sudden, unexpected ache, something akin to loss. She had come back to the city for a promising job, yes, but a small part of her, a part she barely admitted even to herself, had wondered if she might also find Alexandra again. And if she did, what would that be like? There had been nights, alone in her apartment abroad, when she allowed herself to imagine a reunion. In those fantasies, he still loved her, still wanted her, still saw her as the center of his universe. Instead, she had found a man who had gone on a harder, more meaningful journey. The journey of finding himself. "It was the best gift you could have given me, actually," he said, catching her off guard. "What do you mean?" "Breaking up with me," he explained. "If we had stayed together, I would have never faced the things I needed to. I would have kept relying on you to fill the empty spaces. Spaces only I could truly fill." There was a wisdom in his words that left her momentarily speechless. She had left because she needed to grow, because the relationship, as it was, felt stifling, like it was keeping her from expanding her horizons. She had never really considered that her departure might have been, in its own way, a catalyst for his growth as well. "I'm seeing someone now," he said casually, as the conversation naturally drifted into personal life. There was no hesitation in his voice, no anxious glance to gauge her reaction, just a calm statement of fact. "A literature professor, Carolina. We met at a conference almost 2 years ago. We've been together for nearly a year now." "Are you Serious? She asked, trying to keep her voice even. Quite, he confirmed. We're planning to move in together soon, actually. You seem happy, she said, and it was true. There was a serenity in him, a quiet certainty that had never been there before. I am happy, he said, meeting her gaze. But not because I'm with her. I'm happy because I finally learned how to be okay on my own. Carolina is a partner, not a savior. We're building something together because we're already whole, separately. His words fell between them like stones into a still lake, creating ripples that spread in wide, quiet circles. Mariana realized she was sitting across from a man who had turned his pain into growth, his insecurities into self-awareness. There was something deeply compelling about that, something she hadn't expected to feel. And you? He asked, interrupting her thoughts. Someone special? Mariana hesitated. There had been a few relationships over the years, of course. Some more serious than others, but none that had really lasted. The last one had been 6 months ago. An Italian designer who, she now realized, had some of the same qualities as the old Alexandre. The same need for constant validation, the same tendency to make her the center of his universe. Nothing serious at the moment, she finally answered. I've had a few relationships, but I'm also in a period of self-discovery. He smiled brightly, a genuine smile that lit up his face. It's a journey worth taking, he said, and she knew he was speaking from personal experience. When Alexandre looked at his watch, Mariana felt a pang of disappointment. She didn't want the meeting to end yet. There was something magnetic about this new Alexandre, something that intrigued and attracted her in a way she hadn't anticipated. I need to go, he said, confirming her fears. I have a meeting with friends, a book club that we meet monthly. In other times, she knew, he would have canceled any commitment to spend more time with her. He would have rearranged his entire life for the slightest signal from her, but no longer. Another day, maybe? She suggested, trying to keep her voice casual. Of course, he replied, reaching for his wallet to pay the bill before she could protest. It'd be nice to talk more. How long are you staying in the city? Actually, I've come back to stay, she explained. I got a position at an architecture firm here. I'm actually looking for an apartment. Welcome back then, he said with a smile, placing some bills on the table. If you need tips on neighborhoods, I'm available. The city's changed a lot in 5 years. As he got up to leave, Mariana breathed in, a mix of emotions she couldn't fully name. There was a certain irony to the situation. Years ago, she had left behind a man who loved her too much in a suffocating way that kept her from growing. Now that she was back, and perhaps ready to consider a new beginning, he no longer needed her to feel complete. On the sidewalk, under the rain, which was now just a light drizzle, they said their goodbyes with a hug. There was no tension, no suggestion of a future together, but there was a comfortable familiarity in the way their bodies briefly embraced. He smelled like coffee and some cologne she didn't recognize. Another small but significant change. It was good to see you, Mari, he said sincerely. Message me sometime. Carolina and I have friends over for occasional dinners. It'd be nice to have you there. As Alexandre walked away, Mariana paused for a moment, watching his silhouette disappear in the rain. She had returned to the city, expecting to find many familiar things, including, perhaps, the past intact, ready to be resumed whenever she decided. Instead, she found a reminder that life doesn't pause when we step off the stage. People grow, change, and move on. And sometimes, when an ex returns, it's not them who decides if there will be a new chapter, because the person she left behind simply no longer exists. Mariana opened her umbrella and walked in the opposite direction, with the strange feeling that this time, she was the one being left behind.